Hi, I'm C. Thomas Perry, PhD, the author of the book Dying to Be Alive, and I'd like to share with you today about my near-death experience. So give me a moment, I will share my screen and we can get started. So I have titled my presentation, Beyond Death, New Life. This very much sums up the experience I have had, what I've gone through, where it's taken me. But firstly, I'd like to start by just giving you a little background about the experience I had, and then we can talk a bit more about the meanings behind it and how it's affected my life in the long term. So, age 49, in the year 2008, I began to experience chest pains quite severely and thought I'd better get myself along to the doctor and see what was happening. So I was given ECG tests and told to just await the results of these tests to see how things would pan out. Told to rest, wait, and just see what the ECG would inform me of, whether there was a serious problem or if this was just some passing infection or exactly what was the problem. So I obeyed the doctor's instructions for a while. For around about a week, I was taking it easy, not doing too much, just making sure I didn't stress myself out or attempt too much physical activity. After about a week or so, of course, frustration started to set in. I was actually starting to feel considerably better, in a far more reasonable state of health. So I thought, look, I'll go outside and do a little bit of garden work. The garden was getting a bit out of control and I thought I should deal with it. So I thought I would go out and have an attempt to get this garden working a little better. So I took the lime trimmer out of my garage, started the machine or attempted to start the machine, and I was pulling on the cord trying to get this machine to start. It was a particularly stubborn beast. And as I was doing this, suddenly I experienced a very massive chest pain and knew this was more than just a passing little pain like I had been experiencing. This was a massive cramp pain right across the front of my chest. And I knew straight away that something was really wrong here. And almost immediately after that happened, I heard a very loud voice in my head, like it could have been audible, I don't know, but it certainly sounded audible. It sounded very, very loud, very strong. And it said to me, "You are going to die, but I have things for you to do." Now, this certainly caught my attention. So here I was standing in the garden with massive chest pain, a voice telling me I was going to die, but that I had things to do. So I immediately said back, well, which one is it? Am I going to die or do I have things to do? And this voice just very clearly said to me, go inside, call an ambulance, and pack yourself a bag and be ready. So I did that. And the ambulance arrived. It so happened we had a first timer, a rookie in the ambulance on that day who basically was given the job of administering the medication, which was morphine and nitroglycerol to lower blood pressure. And then said, okay, we'll put you in the ambulance and take you off to hospital to see what's going on here, because we think it could possibly be a heart attack. So into the ambulance we went on the gurney, and off we drove to go to the ambulance. And on the way he said, look, I'll give you a little more morphine and a nitroglycerol just to make sure your blood pressure is very low. And he did that. And then I said, I think I'm going to pass out. I was feeling dizzy. I had passed out before in my life. I knew how it feels. And that was it. I was gone. I was in darkness, just floating. I had no sensation of being in an ambulance or any other physical sensation. I just found myself floating in darkness. This went on for a short period of time, and I was not really quite 100% conscious of it at first, but then the awareness started to grow in me that, yes, perhaps I had died, and that I was no longer in my body, yet I was conscious, yet I was very much alert. And this, of course, started to make me feel quite afraid. So as I was just floating along gently in this dark, watery sort of existence, I began to sink down. I began to drift downward, and this only increased the fear. And then I looked further down, and I just sensed a huge, absolutely bottomless, endless void beneath me. And I could just sense that this was very, very deep, or perhaps did not have a bottom to it. So I was obviously very afraid at this point in time. So I just cried out for help. Look, I've been a Christian all my life, and I just cried out, I just said, Jesus, help me. I just screamed it out with everything I had. And nothing happened at first, and I just continued to float along and gradually sinking and descending and thinking, how can I stop this? How can I stop sinking into this bottomless pit? When suddenly an arm reached down and just grabbed me. A hand grasped me by the forearm. And he said to me, you don't want to go that way. I could see, this being who had grabbed me, and he just started to pull me upwards very, very quickly. Things were blurring and fast. It was like, if you've ever seen Star Trek, it was a bit like going into warp speed there. We were just moving at an enormous pace, and I could sense there was an up and a down and a left and a right, and all those sorts of dimensions that I could sense, and we were heading upward very, very quickly. Then eventually we arrived in this cloudy, misty environment, and I could sense there were several beings around, and caught a glimpse of them and realized these are angels. These are angelic beings. There would have been possibly 6 or 7 of these angels, plus the one who had lifted me up and come to fetch me. Then I was just lying there, slightly overwhelmed by everything that had happened, but also starting to experience this amazing feeling of peace and love, and just started to swell up inside me. And I realized it was actually coming from these beings that I was with. And then the one who had lifted me up, he spoke into my mind directly. I could hear his thoughts in my head, and I knew they were his thoughts, and I knew that he was actually addressing me, and he could just talk to me very clearly. He offered me the choice to stay. He said, you can stay here with us and move on to paradise, or you can go back to your life, and the choice is yours. He offered me that choice. So I had to think and carefully consider which way I would go with that. I did choose to return. I had children. I had 5 children at that point in time, and one of them was very heavily brain injured. I had an 8-year-old son, I had a 12-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old daughter. I had children that I just really felt I needed to look after. So I did decide to return to my life, and told him so. I did not, however, find that an easy choice, because the environment I was in was so loving and so beautiful and so peaceful. More than just peaceful, it was tangible love, tangible peace that was so strong it was almost overwhelming, and I was left almost breathless by the power of this love. So look, I asked this being, who are you? He didn't have any name tags on. I didn't know who he was. I just knew that he was having this amazing effect on me. And he said, I am the one you call Lord. Now, for me, that's Jesus. That's who I've called Lord all my life. And I looked at him, and it all made sense. And I realized, yeah, here he was. This is, in fact, this being who came to rescue me, of course, because I called on his name. We were there for some time. There was quite a an extended conversation during which he was just talking to me about my life and the things that had gone down. And he actually at this point said to me, look, I need to do some work on you. You've been through some tough times and I need to do some healing in you. And he checked if I was okay with that, which I said, of course, please do. And I then felt his being somehow come inside me, inside my soul, inside my being, and start to shift things and move things around. And I could feel blockages and strongholds being rearranged within me. It was quite a remarkable experience. And more than that, in this little period of time, I could actually feel his awareness. I was actually aware of what he was aware of just for this few minutes. And this is something that has changed my life completely. For one moment there, I actually sensed the breadth and the scope and the height and the depth of what it is that Jesus is actually aware of, that God's awareness is just so all-encompassing. And still to this day, I'm staggered by the scale of that awareness and how profound and how deep it is. This was certainly the most powerful thing I have ever experienced in my life to this day. At this point, once I'd made my decision and he'd done this work on me, he said, I will send back an angel to check the vessel. He said, go and check the vessel. They were the sort of words that he used. So I looked and I could actually see my body way off in the distance down in the ambulance. Like I could see through the roof of the ambulance and see my body lying there. And an angel flew down, and I saw the angel flying down, took a little while and reached there and started to work his way around my body. And I could see the ambulance operators doing things and obviously trying to revive me. So I was very much aware of what was happening there with my body, but so far removed in such a different environment. Then while that was happening, he started to show me things from my future. It was as if I could look through a veil and see dimly, like a video playing of things that had not yet happened in my life. I could see people in my future. I could see things that had not happened yet. And he was talking to me about choices that I would have to make, decisions I would have to make. He also reinforced to me that the choices I made could potentially influence whether or not I came back. So he said, you must be very careful with your choices. You must keep in mind your option to return to paradise and live that way, live with that in mind. This was the message he was trying to get across to me. This took some time. Look, there were several other things happened, but for the sake of the time of this presentation, I can't go into too much detail. I suggest you read my book, Dying to Be Alive, if you want to find out a little bit more detail about what occurred. So he and the angels then actually said to me, okay, it's time for you to go back now. So once again, I felt myself floating. I felt myself just as if I was floating in water, very free, very light, very easy. And I saw a bright light and I emerged into that bright light and bang, I was back in my body and I took a very deep breath. And there I was lying in the ambulance again. Now, this experience of coming back into my body was not pleasant. I had been in such a delightful spiritual state. I'd been so light and free and filled with love and joy and peace and all the beautiful things that we really desire in life. And I found myself back in this body experiencing a heart attack with pain, not too bad, but really it felt like hitting concrete after where I had been. It felt so heavy, it felt so clumsy, it felt so difficult, it felt evil and it felt dirty in comparison to where I had been which was so clean and pure and just totally wonderful. So I was in the ambulance, and quite some amazing conversation with the ambulance officer. I felt I had been with the angels and with Jesus for a period of 20 minutes to half an hour. And I said, how long has it been? I've been away for ages. And he just looked at me a little taken aback and said, you've only been out for a minute, which totally staggered me because, as I said, it was some period of time and some lengthy conversations that I had had in that experience. That in itself interests me, in that time frames are different. Wherever that is, this other heavenly dimension, it runs on a totally different time frame to our world. And I came back and realized, wow, all of that happened in 1 minute. That is just not possible. So the only solution I can come up with is that there are two very different timescales going on. I could hear angelic voices. It's like I was still partially in their presence for some days to come. They were whispering things to me and saying things to me, and I was amazed at the accuracy of what they were saying and the things they were telling me. For example, they told me I would meet someone who lived within a kilometre of the hospital, and I did meet that person within a few weeks, and they did indeed live very close to the hospital. It was quite remarkable, the extent to which they were able to converse with me for that initial week after my near-death experience. I really felt like it was more of a gradual transition out of heaven than a sudden cut. And I think that was quite intentional on their part, that they were guarding me, protecting me, ensuring I was okay for that period of time. So there we are, and I'm back, and I'm then treated for my heart attack. I'm given a stent. There was a certain amount of damage to my heart, but they said remarkably quite well recovered, and you won't have too many long-term effects. But they just described it as a medium heart attack. The doctor did say to me that many men of my age at that time, around 50, do often just drop dead, and that's it when they have these sorts of heart attacks. So I was very blessed, and I knew God had blessed me, and God had sent me back to do the things that he intended for me to do. One of which I think is this very presentation, which is to actually spread the word about this, to actually make it publicly known. Life from there on, however, was difficult to readjust to living a so-called normal life. It never felt quite the same again. I couldn't really say that I fully experienced love and joy and those emotions once I came back, because it never reached the heights and the magnificence of what I'd experienced. So it was always a halfway existence from that point on, which is quite a difficult adjustment to make. The other side of that is that, of course, I look forward to re-experiencing that one day when death finally does arrive. And I absolutely believe that is the case, that there is a heavenly dimension that we are bound for if we are found worthy, or however that judgment process works, which I absolutely believe in. There is certainly a life awaiting us that is a very real thing. In fact, I would go as far as to say it is more real than the existence we experience here in our earthly life. That's sometimes a little difficult to explain, and yet the reality I experienced there in this spiritual body, in this heavenly realm, felt so much more real, felt so much larger and bigger and better, and certainly more inspiring than this life. And it really has been a difficult process to adjust to not being there, even though it was just for that short period of time. I think we're all we're all instinctively wanting that existence. We're all instinctively desiring that existence deep within us. And this is perhaps why we all think things should be perfect and things should go very well, because that's the sort of experience I had when I was there. So over time, I think it deeply changed me. My whole spiritual life was transformed in that I now had such a total belief in not only the existence of God, but his interest and his ability to communicate with us and to affect us and to change our lives and to do things in our lives. So there was a lot more, I guess, taking it seriously, acting on it, knowing that it was a truth, that there were angels overlooking us in our daily lives, and that there was this whole other dimension which was just through the veil. It's just so close, so imminent, but something that we can't always be aware of. But if we stop and open up our spiritual eyes, then it is there to be seen. And look, I had a lot more spiritual activity. I had things like dreams, I had things like visions that started to occur in my life on a more regular basis. And this was certainly highlighted and increased after this experience. My prayer life was totally transformed because I stopped seeing prayer as something out of a prayer book or an instruction book. And I started to realize this is direct telepathic communication with higher beings. That is what prayer actually is. It is direct telepathic communication with higher beings. If we start to realize that every word we speak is heard, that every action we take is observed, it totally transforms our lives. It totally changes the way I view living here on earth. So what was once faith, what was once a choice to believe in a higher existence, to believe in a God, had now become a knowledge. I just knew. There was no questioning, there was no doubting. I just knew that the angels, Jesus, God exist because I was there with them. I experienced it in a very profound and deep way. That's something I will never forget. That's something I will never change on. Nothing in this life could break that in me because I know it for a fact. So yes, we live in a multi-dimensional universe. I mean, the Apostle Paul even wrote about either himself or someone he knew being taken to the third heaven. So I think it's not as simple as there's a spiritual realm, there's a heaven. I think there's multiple levels. And I think even, the Old Testament prophets spoke of these visions they had, seeing levels of heaven with a throne with a bright light and a rainbow at the top, which is God's very presence. So like there is a stairway, like there is a multi-story existence that we are a part of. One thing that shone through all of this was the power of God's love for all people. I don't think we truly comprehend just how strong this is, that God loves us like a parent loves a little child, that God definitely wants to take us to him, wants to bring us home, I think is the best way to put it. That is one thing I really did feel while I was there, was the presence of family and feeling as if I belonged. This was the place I'd always wanted to be. This is the place I always belonged. This was home in a bigger sense than I've ever experienced in my life. So I think many people who've had NDEs have shared in quite a lot of these feelings that I've experienced myself. What does it mean for us? I think we have a responsibility, number one, to raise the awareness of this spiritual existence that awaits us after death, to actually talk about it publicly, which is not easy. There is a lot of scientific opposition, where science is so based on the physical realm, testing the physical with the physical, not allowing for the fact that anything outside the physical realm can exist, and stomping very heavily on it whenever they have the opportunity as scientists. But I think the evidence is so strong with so many people experiencing NDEs, their experiences being recorded, and such consistency with their records of what has happened. I think it's our responsibility to bring this to the awareness of the world in a greater sense. I don't see any point in taking on science. I don't think science is ever, in its current state, going to agree simply that, yes, this exists and it's all real and God's there. I think that's asking a bit much from the scientists, because their very belief structure works against that. I think, however, we've got to point out to the world the credibility, the feasibility, and just the consistency and breadth and strength of the fact that so many people have had NDEs, that so many people have the same experience of the loving light, the Father, God, however it is they experience it, that is very much concerned with our lives and very much calling us back to itself after death. I think this brings to us a responsibility to, in some small way, be portals from heaven, be portals from this higher dimension, and to bring that awareness and that love into this world. In fact, that is what Jesus said his mission was while he was on earth, was to preach the kingdom of heaven is nigh, is near. That's what he taught. That's what he taught. And I think we have the same responsibility to continue with that mission of raising the awareness in humanity that the kingdom of heaven is near, right at the door, right with us. In all of this, love truly is the essence of God. The old saying, God is love, I think is so true and so simple. The experience of NDE for me is summed up in the word love. Love was the most powerful, all-encompassing thing that I experienced during that time. I think we should, as much as we possibly can, exercise love in our lives. And I think that is the highest duty of anybody who's been there and experienced this, is to communicate that love as much as possible and communicate God's love to all humanity. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I hope it's helped you to perhaps understand a little more what it's like to be there. For those of you who have experienced it, I hope it aligns with your experience, and I just wish you all the best. As I said, please, if you feel interested to find out more, read my book, Dying to Be Alive, and may God bless you. May your lives be rich and full of peace. Thank you.